Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. As Mercedes are fighting Ferrari for second place in this year's Constructors' Championship going into Abu Dhabi, the main focus of Lewis Hamilton and the Mercedes team is of course on next year's W15. Hamilton reveals he has been taking snapshots, if not potentially even pictures, of rival cars throughout the season to try and feed this information and data back to the team. He says that most things they know already, but some things he's trying to help them in any way possible on getting their development right for next season. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new. As always, I would greatly appreciate it. Firstly, a couple of updates going into Abu Dhabi. Robert Schwartzman will be driving in place of Leclerc in FP1, as will Oliver Behrman and Pietro Fittipaldi, as was previously confirmed in the Haas during the FP1 session. So that's an exciting prospect. Behrman was in the car, wasn't he, back in Mexico and did pretty well. So we'll see if that continues. There's also meant to be a meeting this Friday where the F1 Commission will discuss what's happened to Sainz, because Ferrari are not happy what's happened during the race. The fact that there was, look, the 10th place penalty was correctly applied by the rules. The stewards apparently had no way of denying it. So maybe the rules on that front need to be adjusted or updated, but especially Ferrari think on the cost cap side of things, they reckon it cost them near enough $2 million, that impact. And sure, the teams manage a budget with regard to how much crash damage they expect, but that is not insignificant at all. And Ferrari will try and say, look, that damage was not our fault, it wasn't our driver's fault, and therefore it should be added to the cost cap in effect, because otherwise that's $1.52 million less they can spend over this accounting period on actually developing and, well, producing parts for next year's car, which is not ideal. But if the FIA say, look, well, there was a yellow flag where Sainz went over that thing, the yellow flag indicates that there is a hazard present. Look, I don't think that was Sainz's fault at all, but Mercedes could potentially argue that he could have avoided it like Alonso did. But still, I think that if all's fair, then this will be rectified with no penalty, at least on the cost cap side, to Sainz and Ferrari. I'm not so convinced that's frankly going to happen, to be honest, but we'll see what happens as a result of it. Now, we're going to talk about AlphaTauri in a second, at least on what Hamilton has to say, but also on what they're going to be called going forwards, because the rumour has it that the name change is done. Basically, it's a done deal. Whatever they've decided has now been selected. And the rumour is that it's going to be something like Racing Bulls, which I think sounds terrible, but it's better than Hugo Boss Bulls Racing, which is what it was going to be a while ago. Maybe, well, Racing Bulls is better than Bulls Racing as far as I'm concerned, but still, I'm pretty certain there's going to be some sort of sponsor naming arrangement. It's not just going to be Racing Bulls, it's going to be Adidas Racing Bulls or whatever. And, like, I'm not sure I'm a massive fan of it. I would prefer, just call it Toro Rosso, you know? That's what it used to be. Red Bull in Italian. Perfectly fine. Or you could even do Toro Corso or whatever it would be for Racing Bulls if you really wanted to. So that's an option. I'm sure that they will maximize the cash. And there was an article actually from Motorsport that said, yeah, there's going to be 2 different US sponsors incorporated. So I don't know what that's going to look like exactly, but they are trying to cash in on this name change. So it's going to be confirmed apparently in due course, and its brand identity has now been finalized for the team. Look, it's going to be a Red Bull livery. I imagine there's going to be a Red Bull apparently back on the car. It's going to definitely seem much closer to Red Bull than it has done for the last couple of years since AlphaTauri has come in. We all know who owns them, and we see evidence of that on track quite a lot of the time. And in terms of their upgrades, they brought the Red Bull rear suspension since, I'm pretty sure, Singapore. But next year, it's going to be closer to Red Bull again, but with new title sponsors brought in part by Danny Ricciardo. There was another article today that said, yeah, Danny Rick is a big part of why there's so much sponsor interest in AlphaTauri next year, or whatever they're going to be called, which means that it's an interesting one for Danny Rick, isn't it? Because he's driving for AlphaTauri. He's actually a big part of why the sponsors are signing up a deal to make that happen next year. And then he obviously wants the Red Bull seat. So I'm sure he's thinking, well, damn, like, I don't want to be a necessity for AlphaTauri or whatever it's going to be called to keep me around. I want to go to Red Bull. But maybe there's a bit of a conflict of interest there in that discussion. We shall see. But let's talk about this whole Mercedes versus Ferrari thing, because going into the final race of the season, it's very close between the two of them. Last year, Ferrari secured second place in the Constructors. Mercedes were third, but it got relatively close at the end of last season. This year, they're both on significantly less points than they were last year. Fewer points, I guess I should say, because, Aston Martin, McLaren, and also Red Bull have just been better than they were last year. But it's very close. Only 4 points separate the pair of them. difficult to say who should be favourites as well, because Ferrari have the momentum in recent races, but on average over the course of the season, Mercedes have had the marginally better race car, I would say. Ferrari have definitely had the better qualifying car over the course of the season, so it's difficult to predict. I mean, last year they were quicker at Abu Dhabi than Mercedes were, so I think you might have to lean the way of Ferrari. And look, Mercedes have messed up many things lately, and frankly should probably be further ahead than they are, if not from some mistakes from Russell. But then again, Leclerc's been pretty unlucky this season with some of the DNFs that he's had. Also in the Drivers' Championship, Verstappen of course was P1 long ago. Perez and Hamilton both secured P2 and P3 respectively this weekend. That leaves Russell P8 guaranteed, so Hamilton will be 3rd, Russell will be 8th. That is absolutely guaranteed no matter what happens in Abu Dhabi. But places 4th down to 7th are very much up in the air, and Leclerc is still in with a shout of 4th place actually in the championship, despite plenty of DNFs this season with respect to these other drivers. Obviously even a DNS back in Brazil, unfortunately for him. So Sainz is at 200, Alonso is at 200 as well, Norris 195, Leclerc 188. So who's going to get 4th? I think your money probably is going to be on Sainz here, maybe Norris, right? I think that Norris might well finish higher than all of these drivers in Abu Dhabi, but will that be enough to overturn the 5 points over Sainz? Let's say Norris is like P5 or something, then how many points is he going to get for that? 10. So I guess in that circumstance, Sainz would then have to be like 7th to ensure it. I don't know, depends on what happens with Alonso. Of course, Leclerc could also be very good in Abu Dhabi, as he has been previously, so that's definitely up for debate. But of course, the main focus of basically all of the teams that has been for some time is on next year's car for Mercedes. That's the W15. Hamilton has revealed that he has been, well, he calls it taking snapshots. Now, people have translated this to taking pictures, which might be true, but I feel like if Hamilton had actually been taking pictures of other cars, surely we'd have seen some photos of Hamilton snapping an actual snapshot of other cars. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? But nonetheless, he has been saying that he's been sharing as much information as he possibly can with the Mercedes engineers for next year, showing that he's, you know, doing everything it takes, you know what I mean? Like, putting out all the stops to try and maximize Mercedes' chances. He was asked about their improvement and said, look, last year we won in Brazil, but that doesn't mean that we nailed it this year. We were way off the pace back in Bahrain. Nice to be progressing. We have seen progress in the car. Fingers crossed for the winter, but I'll be staying. I'm in touch with our head of aero, and I'm just checking up on him every week. Like, how are we doing? What have you tried? Where's the progress? Have you tried this? He even mentioned recently, Hamilton, that he gets on very well with the whole team, but with Bono, his race engineer, they never argue or anything. They understand each other very well. With Andrew Chauvelin, he's one of the top engineers. He's always prodding him and saying, look, if you try this, if you tried that, how's the car getting on? Are you putting the cockpit in the spot that I wanted? This type of stuff. So Hamilton's very engaged, it seems, on the development of next year's car. We know that full well because in 2022, when the car wasn't good, he spent a long time as the guinea pig trying at all sorts of things, all the sensors on the car to try and understand where they were going wrong, and fundamentally that resulted in the victory for Russell and the 1-2 for Mercedes in Brazil that year. But of course that then sent them down the wrong path for this season, so yeah, it didn't work out in the long run, at least for the moment. But Hamilton says, I take snapshots of every car. I saw underneath the AlphaTauri the other day, and I went back and was like, hey, they've got these things on their floor. You know, I'm just trying to find everything that I can pass on, but they, the engineers, know most of the stuff anyway. So look, Hamilton isn't a Formula 1 aerodynamic engineer, but he definitely knows his way around an F1 car better than you or I, unless you watching this also happen to be an aerodynamicist. But he definitely says that some things that he's found and told the team about, they don't know, because he says, okay, most of the stuff I tell them, they know, they've seen before, but some of the stuff that they haven't necessarily. Now, sure, he's talking about the AlphaTauri, which maybe isn't the best car to copy necessarily, but then again, there have been elements of the AlphaTauri they have taken from the Red Bull. The upgrades they brought in the second half of the season have generally worked very well. Their car's much better now than it was at the start of the season, shall we say, when it was basically the worst car on the grid, and Red Bull weren't happy about that, which is why there's so much of an overhaul right now at AlphaTauri to try and make them more competitive for that Red Bull outfit going into next season and potentially beyond as well. So when he says snapshots here, like, does he mean actually getting his phone out and taking pictures? Because, you know, there's nothing necessarily, you know, wrong with that. I mean, let's be honest, there's pictures taken all the time of these cars by many photographers when they have crashes or incidents or whatever, and I'm I'm pretty sure it was James Allison who said a couple of months back now in one of the Mercedes debrief videos that, yeah, whenever a Red Bull crashes or any car crashes and it's lifted up by a crane, there are tens of photographers taking pictures and sending them straight to the inboxes of all of the Formula One teams. So they get to see all of that stuff anyway. So I can't imagine there's that much that Hamilton could be telling them that they don't already know, but nonetheless, it's pretty interesting. And we have definitely seen Inspector Hamilton in full force over the last couple of seasons. He used to be Inspector Seb, of course. Now Seb's retired. Hamilton seems to be taking over the mantle because, I'll just go through many images here for the last couple of seasons of Hamilton inspecting things. To be honest, the big thing, if he's going to take a picture of something on the AlphaTauri, the rear suspension would be quite a good one because that's what they've copied recently from Red Bull, and the belief is generally now that it's especially the suspension that's giving Red Bull one of their big advantages. This is another shot here of him definitely checking out the side of that Red Bull, and plenty of other images of the same kind of thing. So the last couple of seasons, he's been all over this, Hamilton, and has been trying to get an idea. Now, he's not got his phone out as he's taking a picture of this and sending it back to the team, so maybe he means a mental snapshot to which he then says, hey, they've got this, they've got that, and the team will either listen to him and think, what are you talking about, Lewis? You're not an aerodynamicist, or they will think, okay, actually, you might have a point on this one. Here he is checking out the Ferrari, of course, and there's other screenshots as well that I managed to find. Here he is looking at a Red Bull. There's been lots of this going around, and just like Seb used to do back when he was around in a couple of years, this I found another one was pretty funny as well, where Hamilton's just looking straight into the cockpit here of Verstappen's Red Bull. Maybe it's not Verstappen's, it could be Perez's, but kind of looks like Verstappen's. Bottas is here as well, having a look at as well. So, he's tried his best to try and find something for the team. As I say, the reality is that probably it's not helping massively just because there are plenty of pictures of these cars going around. This is Monaco. I think the picture that I tried to find but couldn't was one that I think I remember seeing in Budapest. You guys remember when Perez crashed on like lap 1 of practice, basically. He was under pressure from Max. The media was talking about it, and then he binned it basically right at the start of practice, went onto the grass a bit and then spun into the wall. His car got lifted up then by a crane, and there were loads of photographers just all snapping pictures of the floor. Pictures that go straight in the DMs of James Allison, basically, and all of the other team engineers. And even here, okay, these aren't necessarily photographers, but everyone's taken pictures of the Red Bull, and I'm sure these pictures ended up somewhere. So if you're a Mercedes engineer and you're hearing Hamilton say, oh, I saw this on the AlphaTauri, do you care more about that, or do you care about the pictures of the actual AlphaTauri floor, or let's say the Red Bull floor, which is probably more valuable, that are coming into your emails, maybe one rather than the other, but still shows that Hamilton is basically doing whatever it takes to try and give Mercedes even some slight advantage and help going into next season. Who knows? Maybe one of the things that Hamilton has spotted that teams didn't otherwise realise might be instrumental to how they might perform going into next season. But really, what they need pictures of is the Red Bull, right? Because look at some of these numbers over the course of the season. This is the average race pace. Now you can consider, okay, how much of this is Max, how much of this is Perez, but then again, even Max, who, maybe has pace in hand over everyone just because of how good he has been this season, wasn't necessarily always pushing the car to the max anyway. So this is the discrepancy in race pace. Now, qualifying pace, it looks like this, which is kind of interesting just to compare here. So this is quali trim. Now, McLaren looks pretty bad here compared to how they have been. I think largely because the start of the season was so woeful. It was only really like round 8 they started to be good. But on average, Red Bull, obviously the fastest qualifying car, Ferrari 2/10 back, Mercedes 4/10 back, then on average McLaren, then on average Aston Martin, then Alpine. In race trim, it's a pretty similar order, but simply these are the numbers instead. And, race pace, basically they gain half a second on everyone. Not necessarily. Aston Martin have generally been better in the race than in qualifying. We can actually see here that on average, they barely go back at all between race trim and between qualifying trim, but everyone else moves back on Red Bull. So there's a few reasons for this. Mercedes and Ferrari have been pretty much neck and neck, actually, it seems, on race pace this season. So earlier on, I said that on average, Mercedes might have had the faster race car. That kind of feels true looking at the season, but maybe that's driver difference. I don't know. Apparently, it's been very, very similar between the pair of them, which I guess makes sense because they're on basically the same amount of points, and points are given out on Sunday or in the sprint races. But if I was James Allison or, Andrew Chauvelin and Hamilton's telling me, oh, the AlphaTauri's got this on their floor, I'm like, all right, go look at the Red Bull and then tell me what they've got on their floor, because that'll be probably more valuable to next year's development. And also to say on Red Bull, I thought it was interesting that Christian Horner said that after this damage that Verstappen maintained from the impact with Russell, it barely caused him any performance loss. Horner basically said, yeah, had no real significant effect. We saw this back in Jeddah 2021 when after the kind of infamous Verstappen, whatever, brake check, whatever you want to call it, when they collided on that back straight there, when they were basically playing DRS chicken, you guys know how it went, and Hamilton knew what Verstappen was trying to do, decided not to pass in the way that maybe he could have done. They collided, he had front wing damage, but eventually got the move done and survived in the race and actually had great pace even with the front wing damage and the missing end plate. So definitely feels like in this era, the end plate is not massively important. I guess the idea is from the FIA is to try and ensure with the end plates that it limits some of the outwash more than they would otherwise like. And I'm sure that it caused Verstappen a little bit more understeer in the car, and probably at circuits like Suzuka in Sector 1 wouldn't have been so ideal. But it's kind of impressive that Red Bull are able to maintain such a great level of performance even with no end plate on the front of the wing, which, you know, I think everybody knows that the end plate isn't massively influential aerodynamically, but at the same time, that's clearly not where Red Bull's strength is coming from. You know, it's not in their front wing end plate where they're getting the performance. It's the suspension, it's the floor, it's stuff like this, which Hamilton apparently has been trying his absolute best to figure out over the course of the season. But very much interested your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.